By 1900, Pittsworth had grown to be a thriving community supporting a flour mill, blacksmith shops and plenty of pubs. Horses were the main form of transport. 1901 was the year of the first Pittsworth show, held at what was then the racecourse. The main agricultural pursuits were dairying and wheat. 1902 saw the establishment of Kiefer Brothers, later to become Warfield Brothers. Pittsworth Cheese Factory was proclaimed the largest cheese factory in Queensland. The Union Bank of Australia opened in 1905. 1906 saw the Crimson Flash. A.B. Possel acclaimed as the fastest man in the world. In 1909 he was awarded the 220 yards World Championship. Until 1910 he was unbeaten in Australia, holding world records for the 50, 60 and 80-yard sprints. His record for 75 yards, set in 1908, stood until 1970. 1908, the foundation stone was laid for St. Stephen's Church, and 22 subscribers were connected to the telephone. In 1910, Henry Lindenberg took over the family company from his father Charles. Today a major Mitsubishi agent, Lindenbergs remain one of the oldest family companies still operating in Queensland. 1912 saw a tornado and hailstorm hit the main street, causing considerable damage. The foundation stone for St. Andrew's Church was laid in 1912. Following a ballot, the Pittsworth Shire Council was formed in 1913. The Shire Chambers were built in 1914 at a cost of $1,500. These later became the present-day kindergarten. With the First World War, many young men volunteered to serve their country. The late Sid Saul joined the 11th Australian Light Horse Regiment. An extract from an original letter, 1917, sent home by Trooper L.P. Craig. The column on the march was a sight worth seeing. About 1,800 mounted men, besides the camel transport and its necessary personnel. The last 30 miles was a dry stage, which we did in 2 night marches, so as not to be observed by the enemy. Awfully creepy night, not allowed to smoke or speak loudly. Here we see the first aeroplane in Pittsworth. Mr. and Mrs. Marcus Lindenberg were amongst the terrified joy flighters. Prickly pear had started to spread early in the century, becoming a major catastrophe as vast areas of productive land quickly became impenetrable. The 1920s saw the beginning of a large-scale wheat production in the Pittsworth Shire. The first tractor and header arrived in 1921. In 1924, the Brookstead depot took 25,000 bags of wheat. Farmers such as Zeismers and Fleglers were some of the early growers on the plain. Towards the end of the 20s, Zeismers were growing crops up to 5,000 acres. In 1925, the Pittsworth Cheese Factory made the world's largest cheese. This was sent to London for the Empire exhibition at Wimberley. Over the next decade, the Pittsworth district was to produce 11% of all cheeses made in Queensland. At its peak, the dairy industry supported 6,500 farmers on the Darling Downs. By 1999, there were only 24 left in the Shire. In 1933, the golf club was moved to its present site at the Pittsworth Racecourse. It took until 1974 for all the greens to be grassed. In 1935, the famous camp drafting trophy, the Warwick Gold Cup, was won by Archie Trott. In 1929, Trott had also won the Australian Buck Jumping Championship. The council was instrumental in getting the now famous road burner to work in the Shire in 1938. This wood-fired machine was to burn the black soil and turn it into an all-weather surface for the Shire roads. The machine, weighing around 35 tonnes, travelled from Brookstead about 8¼ miles, where it remained on the side of the road until recently. 1938 was also the year Warfield Brothers became the Ford dealers for the area. and Powell's Garage, now Holden Dealers, commenced trading. In 1939, World War II came. After initially joining the Australian Light Horse, Roy Limont, seen here far right, transferred to the Air Force, where he was to see service as a tail gunner in the famous Dam Busters. Roy was to fly many other missions over Europe, seen here in a Lancaster on a bombing mission over Norway. 1940 was the centenary celebrations of the settlement of the Downs, and Pittsworth provided a float. In 1945, the Progress Association and the community, with the assistance of council machinery, constructed a swimming pool at the Springs. In 1946, Sunshine Machinery commenced business in Pittsworth, now one of Queensland's biggest case outlets. Jopek's Hardware, later to become the Pittsworth Mitre 10 store, was opened in 1948. The following year saw the final horse race meeting held at the Pittsworth Racecourse. The Ambulance Committee was formed and later built a new ambulance centre. Bulk handling of grain revolutionised the industry. Silos and handling facilities were first built at Brookstead and Bongene. With the increase of grain growing, the poultry industry began to flourish. The Civic Centre, comprising the Town Hall and Council Chambers, were built in 1956. 1956 will also be remembered for the flood, when 10 inches of rain was received in a 24-hour period. In 1958, a new swimming pool was built on land donated by the Lindenberg family, and the Brookstead community built a new hall. Pittsworth State High School took in its first students, and the Commonwealth Bank also opened. In 1960, new buildings in the town included the National Australia Bank and a new courthouse. In 1968, Warfield Brothers moved and St. Peter's Lutheran Church was built. The Vietnam War began in the late 60s, and one of those to enlist in the regular army was 17-year-old Barry Saul. Corporal Saul received posting to Vietnam shortly after his 19th birthday. The 70s saw the expansion of the livestock industry. Poultry, pigs, and the lot feeding of cattle became a major part of the economy. Sorghum took over from wheat and barley as the major grain crop. In 1974, Mr. and Mrs. C.G. Cronk donated the land for the development of the Folk Museum and Historical Society. Here we see Roy Possel splitting shingles for the Shepherd's Hut. In 1976, the town celebrated its centenary with a parade to commemorate the event. Sir Alan Fletcher was knighted and became Speaker of the Queensland Parliament. Prior to entering Parliament, he was Chairman of the Pittsworth Shire. The Pittsworth Show and Recreation Pavilion was opened by 1980. This, along with lighting for the show ring and power to most parts of the ground, marked the start of the major rebuilding of the facilities. As part of the 1988 show, the Pittsworth Show Society staged a bicentennial parade. In 1986, Pittsworth Danes won another premiership under the coaching of the now immortal Gary Sutton. In the 80s, the cotton industry began a major expansion on the Downs. From humble beginnings, cotton has grown to become a major earner for the area. The development of ring tanks for irrigation and the expansion of the rain-grown crop have seen the Darling Downs produce crops in excess of 300,000 bales. Module builders revolutionised the handling of cotton crops. Here we see Richard Very loading modules onto flat-top trailers for transport. Brookstead Hall was to burn down 1 week prior to the school's 75th Jubilee celebrations. In true country spirit, the dance scheduled as part of the festivities was held in the local grain shed. Within 2 years, the community had rebuilt the hall. The broccoli industry started. Matilda is now one of the leading exporters of broccoli into Japan and Southeast Asia, and during the season is also one of the biggest employers. Philip and Diane Jauncey, pioneers in this industry. Motorsport has established itself as a major event with the formation of the Pittsworth Sprints, a great attraction for the town and the local charities from its success. As we venture into the next millennium, we can be justly proud of the achievements of the past century. Apart from the flourishing community, Pittsworth can boast a first-class hospital and retirement village, including Boaraba Lodge. It also has many first-class sporting facilities and excellent schools. New technology has emerged at the close of the 20th century that would seem like science fiction to our forebears.